when I went to Italy, it was like the wine is cheaper than water.
Time for Wine Talks with Paul K.
Fascinating story.
This is Robert Mondavi from the Michael Mondavi Winery.
I taste a lot of wine.
Having a conversation with Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary,
Michael Silacci, Opus One Winery.
Incredible conversation with Dr. Mia Ruth.
No matter what, you're definitely going to feel better.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California, about to have a conversation with Carolyn Covington all the way out in Virginia. Introductions in just a moment. Wine Talks, of course, available on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you hang out for podcasting, and always sponsored by the Original Wine of the Month Club, now sporting the Napa series of wines. Hey, have a listen to a show coming up. It's actually out. It's been out for a while, but it's a very important show. It's called the Steven Spurrier Show. Steven Spurrier being, of course, the architect of the Judgment of Paris, passed away last year during COVID, but a phenomenal historical viewpoint of how California wine and American wine in general hit the world scene in 1976. Have a listen. But not why we're here today. Here to have a conversation with Carolyn Covington. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Carolyn Covington calls herself the American wine girl. She's a wine blogger, lifestyle blogger, podcaster, wine educator. Anything else I can put on that list that you do? Because you do a lot.
Oh my gosh, that's good. That's good for now.
Is that enough?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. I mean, I was looking at that. I thought, gee, she's almost, and I'm looking at your pictures on your website, and the website's carolcovington.com. So many diverse things that you've done, and it's such a fascinating a viewpoint from the lifestyle. Do you think that, like, would you call yourself a life coach kind of thing, or just a
Oh gosh.
lifestyle coach kind of thing?
Yeah, I wouldn't call myself a life coach, but like I like to throw in lifestyle stuff into my blog, not just wine. So lifestyle is a good word.
This is a fascinating subject, and we just passed New Year's Eve, of course. And my wife and I both think it's kind of uneventful in general, but whatever. I did I did consume a whole bottle of champagne on my own.
There you go.
Well,
Hey, it's New Year's Eve. That's fine.
exactly. And you had a
Space it
great
out throughout
article.
the night.
You had a great article on your site about the best champagnes for New Year's Eve, or the best sparkling wines. And just a funny anecdotal story. My friend called. She says, we're having the party. We have 70, 80 people. Can you get me Veuve? And I can, but my wholesale cost, because it's such a broad market product, is actually a couple of dollars more than, let's say, a Costco or a Sam's Club or something. And but when I get there, and she bought some from Costco, and when I get there, I asked for sparkling wine. The guy pours me La Marca, and I'm like, no, I know there's around here somewhere.
Yeah, no. Oh
But
man, that's
you
funny.
did put on here, and you wrote the best budget champagne, which is the Pommery, the Brut Royale, which I've not had, I don't believe. What did you drink New Year's Eve?
Oh my gosh, I drank a couple different things. A grower champagne that my friend was pouring that was delicious, and then we opened. What did we open? This, it's on my list, the Pierre Paillard champagne. I'm loving those kind of like smaller producer grower champagnes lately.
Well, I think that's right on. I consider Clovis Tétanger a friend. That is obviously a very big brand, but the Comte de Champagne is Blanc de Blanc is very, very good. And I was hoping that I could convince my friend to pour that, but
So good.
it's not cheap, though, right?
No, not cheap, but definitely worth it. It's so
How
good.
do you find these unique small boutique champagnes? Where are you tasting, and how are you tasting?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great local wine shops actually in Charlottesville that I've tried a few. And then I read other people's blogs. I see what other people are drinking, and I, order them and try them. And I attend as many tastings as I can, which is really how I kind of learn.
Do you subscribe to the idea that champagne is not just for celebration?
Yes, I do. 100%. It's for any time.
It's kind of like the movie Santa Claus. Tinsel is not just for decoration. So that
Yeah. I love that.
I mean, it's my go-to drink at home regularly, and of course, I've taught my daughter and my son-in-law, and now it's costing me too much money to keep them in proper
Ugh.
champagne.
Yeah, it's hard to hang on to the bottles too.
So tell me about the wine scene in the public facing wine scene in Virginia. Is this tasting rooms? Is the restaurant
Mhm.
curating, happening?
Yeah. So in the town of Charlottesville, which is where I live, there's so many like wine shops, wine connoisseurs. People are really into wine. But in the whole surrounding area, what is like Albemarle County, there are hundreds of vineyards, which is really awesome. So you've got like Central Virginia wine country, which is where I am. And then you have your Northern Virginia wine country, where there's also a lot of amazing wineries. So there's that whole aspect of it, which is beautiful, and it's a very young industry, but the winemakers and viticulturists are doing some really unique things. So it's a fun place to be in. Everyone like loves wine in this area, which is why I love living here.
It's kind of interesting. You said it's a new industry, and I think that there
Mhm.
is some development on the East Coast in awareness of wines from the East Coast. But I mean, Virginia in itself is not a new industry as far as wine. I mean, Thomas Jefferson tried and failed a couple of times.
Yes.
But I featured a wine from Prince Michel, I think like 25 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I
So
guess when I say like new industry, I'm talking like late 1900s is when like the modern day wine
yeah, I
industry
see.
that we
Right.
know
Right.
today
Right. Right.
versus like, yes, of course you had Thomas Jefferson in like the 1700s and things. But like what we know today, it's still relatively new, especially compared to like, you think of other regions around the world.
For sure, compared to let's. You're right, and so
Yeah.
I think that there is a new awareness of wines.
Mhm.
Is the climate change thing that you think has made the wines more approachable, or is it just the fact that there's social networking and there's digital communications that are instant, that all of a sudden places like Virginia, New York, Long Island are starting to get some recognition?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the communication part of it. And I think just the more that, we know and learn and experiment with what grape varieties are doing well here, how is it working with our very unique climate and
Mhm.
just terroir of it all, we're starting to learn and get a little bit better every year on the wines that we're producing. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And the community in the Virginia wine industry is really special because people aren't trying to like hold on to their secrets and
Mhm. Mhm.
compete with each other, like because it is a difficult place to grow grapes. It's not, the easiest climate in the world. People here are really open to collaborating and sharing their discoveries and things like that, which is why I think it's also becoming more successful.
Is there a Virginia Vintners Association of some sort?
There is, yes. I don't know the exact name of it, but there is one.
But they get together and share. You know what? That's
Yeah.
one thing about our industry it is very camaraderie. There's a very camaraderie. That sounded great. There is a lot of camaraderie amongst vintners, and not so much it looked as competitors, but as supporters of the entire industry. So what are they
Mhm.
growing in? I think I featured a Chardonnay, which, is a cool weather wine, a grape. It can do well that way. What, uh,
Mhm.
what has that changed, and what are they growing other things than the standard thing?
Yeah. Yes. So, yep, of course, you have your Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc and Merlot are probably some of the most like common, but the ones that are actually doing really well in our area is Petit Manseng has been thriving as a white grape varietal, and it's pretty unique, which is
Wow.
fun. Cabernet Franc for reds, and then Petit Verdot. And lately, a lot of Tannat has kind of been the newest one that's really up and coming.
Wow. Okay. So you've got Petit Manseng, which is an incredibly not rare grape, but certainly not grown in America very much.
Yeah.
But the Bordeaux varietals, that's fascinating
Hmm.
because they
Yeah.
require a little more heat. And then you
Yes.
the Tanat, which is like almost solely in Uruguay. I wonder how they
Yeah.
think about it. So
Well, it's interesting because like our climate here during the growing season is quite hot. I mean,
Mhm.
like our summers are really, really warm, but I think our biggest challenge is like the rain and humidity, is
Mm.
the one thing that we deal with. So if we get too much rain, of course, you're kind of diluting that sugar concentration that you really want in the grapes. So for us, our drier years are always our better years. And for the most part, like summers throughout harvest are very warm, which is good for ripening purposes.
That's an interesting point. Um, the moisture potential for mold,
Yep.
probably critical to pick the grapes at the proper time, not only because of sugar content of phenolic ripeness, but
Mhm.
boy, the next day we could start seeing some kind of taint. Um, does that preclude biodynamic and organic farming in Virginia? I'm just shooting out loud here.
Yeah.
Seems to me that sulfuring the vines, which don't have a problem with at all myself, but would be
Mhm.
necessary. Is that accurate or no?
Yes. So it is very hard to have an organic vineyard here just because, I mean, we do have loads of pests and the humidity and fungus is an issue. So it's pretty hard to not use spray and chemicals on your vines. Of course, like you can try to find natural ones, but that's more expensive and minimizing it as much as possible. But yeah, it's like I said, it is a difficult place to grow grapes, and you do need some of that help. So I don't actually know of any organic vineyards here or biodynamic.
For me, it's here nor there. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
you got to do what you got to do to produce a crop. And I know that they kind of make up for it with more minimal intervention in the winemaking process and
mhm.
using really good quality, procedures throughout the whole thing. But yeah, it's tough.
Well, it's interesting because organic defined in America is different than it's defined in Europe. In Europe, you can use sulfur, so there's nothing
Yeah.
unorganic about the sulfur they use anyway. In fact, that whole conversation to me is, I get both points of view here regularly on the show. I mean, for one, long before all these things were around, everything was organic anyway. You just made wine from what you got from the earth, and their pesticides, herbicides, and insecticides didn't exist. So
Yeah.
okay, and then the Bordelais come along with the sulfur dioxide and help the wines because you're not going to throw away a crop. So here's your way to save a crop and make a wine and make a product, and it's
Mhm.
completely natural. So I don't know what natural's supposed to
Yeah.
be in most cases, but has the
Yeah.
has the climate change improved things? I mean, I know in England they can grow grapes now, that they weren't be able to before. Has that helped the 1 or 2 degrees of change or no?
Not really. I mean, summers here have always been really warm. I think what climate change has kind of done to our area is like more extremes and also like more unpredictable weather patterns and like almost like bipolar weather, which is actually really tough because, you think of like your spring frosts and we'll have a couple of days in March that are beautiful 60 plus degrees. So those buds are starting to break and then a couple of days later it'll be below freezing and then you're losing your crop that way. So there's all these different things that I think are happening from climate change, which is challenging.
Is it snow there where you're at?
It does, but it's weird. It's like it depends on the year. So last year we got tons of snow this time of year, and today it's like 65 and sunny. So it just depends.
I was just reflecting on a trip to Millbrook, New York in like 1994 or something, and driving by vineyards where they're wearing dry suits and that are clamped around their neck and their arms and
Yeah.
legs pruning. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking to myself, for what? What
Yeah.
are you going to get out of this? I mean, what are you producing that's so it's gratifying that you need to come out in this 3 feet of snow and prune? But the more I've studied this industry and the more passion it takes to do anything, and particularly the same Virginia to get through these obstacles and headwinds to produce something as interesting as a bottle of wine. If I go to
Yeah.
a local Charlotte restaurant, do I see a lot of Vermont wines on the list? I mean, Virginia?
Uh, see a lot of Vermont wines here.
Virginia, sorry.
Oh, Virginia. You will, especially like the local boutique restaurants, you will. But I mean, you'll see international wines from all over, but they usually try to throw in a couple local wines, which is fun.
And there's some support from the consumer for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm looking through your site and I'm going, wow, this girl's gotten around. And you spent some time in Italy and Florence studying. What were you studying there?
Yes, I was studying art history was my big thing I was studying, but overall, like it was just one semester. I was actually studying business and marketing in college. But yeah, I was studying art history and just mostly just having a great time. Wasn't taking school too seriously when I was out there.
Wow, how could you? But studying art history in a place like Florence would probably be a pretty smart thing to do, as far as understanding what's that whole part of the side of the world. But did you get an appreciation for Italian wines there? Or did you have that going in, or what did you find so fascinating about that?
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing, I was 21 when I studied abroad there. So like just technically became legal to be able to drink wine. And, of course I was drinking a little bit before that. I mean, I was in college, but I wasn't really into wines. My parents were into wine, so they would introduce some stuff to us. And, I didn't really totally get it yet. And I was like, oh, especially red wines, like it's just not my thing. My palate wasn't really developed. And when I went to Italy, it was like the wine is cheaper than water. I mean, as a broke college student, I was like, I can either pay for the vino della casa or a bottle of water. So let me just get the vino. Why not? Yeah. And so that's really, really where I like first started even drinking red wine. And then it became a lot more of like, wow, like this wine is a part of their culture. It's a part of their history. It's a part of their way of life. Like it was all of these things. It wasn't just a drink, a beverage. It was a huge, huge part of life for people there. And I found that fascinating. So that's kind of where my spark of passion came from.
I can see that. I wonder what it is about white wine that it's always this, it's not the primary. It is the primary. Like when I got married in 1986, a long time ago, my wife only drank white wine, and now she's my biggest critic of my red wines. Do you think that your palate changes or grows or becomes more sensitive? What is it you think that makes white wine more approachable and more interesting in the beginning?
I think the fact that it's lighter and, it doesn't have tannin structure, which I feel like for a lot of people starting out, like that bitterness is like not enjoyable. Lighter, fruitier, floral. I mean, I was drinking like Sauvignon Blancs. I wasn't really drinking like your oaky, buttery Chardonnay. I was definitely drinking like the lighter things. So I think that's why it's just like a little more approachable, and some are a little more simple. Yeah.
Because it can be very complex. And if you start to find some things, we're going to talk about Sicilian wines here in a little bit, but, they are fascinating as well. But I can say probably 99% of the wine we drink at home is red.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of, you said something about the culture of wine in Florence and, being part of Tuscany. And this is the part of what this show is for. It's to help people understand that there's beyond Cali Red. I keep saying this. I use the same terms all the time, same brands that we see at the market, and that there's something very interesting on the other side. Is that what this blog is about? Is to sort of get people out of their comfort zone into new things, try new things?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the reason why I started my blog was when I came back from Italy. And, I started to dabble and try new things beyond what was just in your everyday grocery store. And, my friends were like, oh, like, what are you doing? Wine is like so gross, like other than Moscato. And I was like, oh my gosh, like you guys don't know about this. How can I find a way to teach people about these amazing wines that are out there? Specifically, at the time it was geared towards millennials and people more my age, because you don't see a lot of young people in their 20s like drinking sophisticated wines. And not that I was like, oh, it has to be a sophisticated, expensive bottle, but just trying new things. So that's the thing is my blog. I love to introduce unique wines, wine regions, and wine travel to people, and yeah, shed a little light on those regions that we don't know as much about.
Have any of your friends turned the corner? That's the question. Have any of them said, "Wait a minute, I think Carolyn's on something"?
Yeah, they have. Even my parents have. Like my
Whoa.
parents, they were the ones that were really into wine. But as I started to learn more about it, I was like, oh, wait, they're into wine, but like they drink the same Napa Valley red wines from their like 2 or 3 wineries that they love, which is fine. But like, you guys try this Brunello, try this Greek wine, and they'll try it. And they're like, oh my gosh. Like, so I've like, especially now I'm even noticing my demographic of people that are following me has sort of changed. Like I had started it for people in their young 20s, and now it's like actually all ages, which is really cool.
That's great. Congratulations.
Yeah.
When this Christmas Eve, what am I wrong with me? This New Year's Eve party, when I went to get this glass of sparkling, and they're going to pour the La Marca, which for everybody out there is a Gallo product. And, clearly it's Prosecco. It's, not made in the traditional method, all those things that could be considered, negative features. But the daughter of my friends were very close. And I said, where's the Veuve? She goes, well, we did a taste test, my friends and I, and we couldn't tell the difference. So I said something very aristocratic and very snooty, the exact thing that we shouldn't be telling anybody to get people to try new things. I said, well, it's not unlikely nor unusual for a wine like a Prosecco that's got a little sugar in it to beat out, a fine champagne in a taste test amongst your peers, because they're more approachable and they're so interesting. Champagne's so complicated, it can be very complex, that you don't notice. So then I went, you idiot. That's exactly what you should be telling people.
Yeah.
That's a great value, and we'll taste some other stuff later together and see how it goes. But I still drink it, and I made them find the Clicquot that they bought. And I think part of this, and you're doing it yourself. We're going to talk about Sicilian wines here, but the one thing that's so interesting, and I'm not a huge Veuve fan because there's other interesting things, but the book by Tilar Mazzio, Widow Clicquot, is a fascinating story of a brilliant woman who created the brand and changed the needle for French champagne in the 1700s. When I'm tasting this wine, even though it's 200 years later, 300, I'm like, there's a cool story here. Do you find that interesting? Do people find it interesting, the stories you're telling? Like, you've been to Tuscany, you've been to Florence, you're tasting Brunellos, you're out, near Siena, doing all those things. People interested in hearing about those stories?
Yeah. And I mean, that's my favorite part, right? Like tying in the culture and the why, and just focusing on the story behind it, especially with wine. It's just, that's such a fun thing to share. And I think that also like resonates with people a lot more than just like, oh, this wine tastes like berries and oak, whatever. Like people want to know like what's behind the bottle, and how it was made, where it was made, what's the family like, how do they harvest this? And I think that's a big part of wine, is the storytelling behind it.
Do you think that, like your experience overseas and your time you spent in Tuscany, et cetera, do you think that the culture of wine is as important to the outlook of life as the culture of food is in any particular part of the world besides America, because we don't have either one of those, but so. Yeah,
I think so. I think like, especially in those European countries, like food and wine is so much a part of their culture and their way of life. And it's a lot more like simple in a way, at least in some places, which is, I really appreciate that. I mean, people in America don't slow down enough to stop and smell the wine and enjoy it. And I mean, some people do, especially those that appreciate it, but it's a lot more common and appreciated there for sure.
Well, it is part of the lifestyle. I mean, I think when Morley Safer came out with the the Mediterranean lifestyle book, and they live longer and they eat more fat, and they the French particularly have foie gras, which is goose liver fat, but they still outlive us, and they smoke and they don't go to the gym. It was kind of interesting to figure that out, and it came down to a part of it was the glass of red wine or two at night, as well as their lifestyle's a lot slower than ours.
Yeah.
Maybe you've witnessed this, but I find that the grass is always greener. I'm very jealous of the Institute of Wine and Food in France, for instance, or Italy for that matter, where they've protected their regional nuances in their lifestyle. So the French have protected their butter, they've protected their cheese, they've obviously protected their wine, as the Italians have. In America, it is what it is. You do whatever you want. You go to Howard Johnson's, anywhere in the country, at least not anymore, but back in the day, and have the same hamburger you could have had on the East Coast or the West Coast.
Yeah.
I find it disturbing. But we're starting to get our feet back on the ground about cuisines and regional cuisines and protecting those cuisines, but there's nothing legally protecting them like they are in other parts of the world. But the French and the Italians think it's great because they can come to America, they can pant Sangiovese, Petit Manseng, they can, whatever they want, wherever they want, and see how it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you found in Italy, and let's talk about Sicily here, this amazing cultural focus on food and wine and lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so special. And yeah, like I said, it's really like a way of life there, which is so beautiful. So I always try to spend as much time in Europe as I can because it's just totally different. Like you said, yeah, the grass is greener. Like, a lot of times I'm like, oh, what I would do to live in Europe. But of course, there's so many amazing things in America. And yeah, things in the wine industry, they're changing. And in Virginia too, like definitely getting better, but just different. It's really interesting.
Tell me about your trip to Sicily and what the wines there that you fell in love with.
Oh man, so Sicily is amazing. I have only been to like the Mount Etna region, but I love that area because of the really unique terroir, volcanic soil. It's, right by the water. So you're getting, your sea breezes and really unique minerality in the wines. You have your Caricante, your Nerello Mascalese. They make amazing sparkling wines from Caricante in traditional method. Frappato, which is that really light red wine. So many unique things. Your Etna Biancos, everything. I just definitely lighter style wines. Of course, I also love the Nero d'Avola, but that's from more of the West Coast side. So I didn't actually go over there yet. Of course, it's on my list at some point. But yeah, not only is it beautiful, but you have these amazing wines with really unique complexity and expression. And it's going perfectly with the food of the island, which is, more seafood, lighter pastas. And, like they say, what grows together goes together. And it's just a beautiful experience.
I like that. I've been trying to come up with something like that. What grows together goes.
Yes.
I think that's a feature of wine and food that I think what we were just talking about with America that we've missed completely, but we don't have our indigenous wines. So, I guess the slate's open for us to do what we want, but what I think there's a huge synergy between local foods and local wines. But when you said Nerello Mascalese, which, has to be one of my favorite grapes, and I took a bottle to an Italian restaurant here in the beach cities, and very good Italian food. The somm was like, whoa. And they have one on their list. Not as good as mine. But they have one on their list. And, I mean, how many people probably walk into a restaurant with a Nerello Mascalese under their arm? It's probably pretty rare.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. What I like are the Etna wines are unbelievable. The volcanic soil is unbelievable. And it leads me to this point because there's something about Sicilian wines as well. And it happens in Sardinia and the other islands. Anyway, my mind is slipping. Where you get this sort of savory offshore wind, Mediterranean salt.
Yeah.
And I think that is just fascinating for me to taste. And then, of course, seafood or shellfish have to go with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Like, not only are you getting that mineral characteristic from the soil, but you're also getting that from your weather, your climate, from the sea breezes. And then you're also getting like island sunshine. So you're
Mhm.
getting this amazing ripening and complexity that's developing in those grapes throughout the growing period. So yeah, I mean, they're beautiful wines. And like, I think just in Italy in general, like Italian whites are some of
Mhm.
my favorite white wines. And I feel like they're really underestimated. So that's something I always share with my audience too, is I'm like, don't sleep on Italian wines. They're so good, or Italian white wines specifically. They're so good.
You're the second person, me being the first that I know, that has stated categorically that the Italian whites, those indigenous Italian whites, are so fascinating and so
Yeah.
complex and so interesting. And you wonder why they get no traction,
Yeah.
unless amongst the wine geeks.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to spread the word.
Yeah, because they're so good. So let's move to Greece a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
I did an influencer from Greece, going through the
Oh,
economic turmoil they went, and here this young lady who was an engineer, I think she's a mechanical engineer. She just said, "I'm screw this. I'm going to go into wine," and has become an
wow.
influencer down there doing wine lists for restaurants and etc. Do you see Greek wines in Vermont? I mean, why do I keep saying Vermont? In Virginia?
Um, you do a little bit. So, I mean, but like the very common ones, like I think maybe just Assyrtiko, which is
Mhm.
probably like the most common.
Mhm.
So not too many, but yeah, I've seen it like at one or two places.
And do you care for them?
I do like Assyrtiko. Um, it's very unique. I have to be in the mood for that particular wine, but I do enjoy it. Especially if I'm having something lighter to eat, like again, like light seafood or pasta or something. But with other Greek wines, I mean, I also did the Nemea wine country
Mhm.
when I was out
Mhm.
there this past summer,
Mhm.
which was really beautiful. I had no clue it was going to be as gorgeous as it was, just like you're kind of landlocked in that area, but there's so many mountains and so much history, of course, which I love. But you have your Ayuritico, which is really nice. And there's not too many Greek grape varieties that are really well known. But of course, you've got like your Ayuritico, Casino Mabro, and then Asertico, I would say, are the three most popular. And those are the three that I really enjoy. And then you have some other little ones kind of sprinkled in. But it was fun to experience and try things that are totally different, especially a place that their history of making wine goes way back, which is
Mhm.
kind of the fascinating part. Hmm.
That's the part about wine that, uh, jumping on that subject, that I think is so different than any other industry. Anything with a food, anything to do with, I mean, food, even contemporary cuisine is even relatively modern. When you talk about, for instance, the vines in Virginia, um,
Hmm.
winemaking so far can be traced easily back 7 to 8,000 years. Kind of
Yeah.
like somebody figured out, like, wow, this fermented grape is pretty good. We feel pretty good
Yeah.
after drinking this stuff. Or, and obviously the techniques are different, but
Hmm.
the history of those really ancient places.
Hmm.
I've discussed this before on the show. They found a completely intact winery in Armenia, and since you lived in Glendale, you should
Yeah.
appreciate this.
That's really cool. I've never had Armenian wine.
Well, I think much like the Greek and probably even places like Virginia,
Hmm.
Armenia is a little bit different in that the Soviet rule suppressed any kind of creative winemaking because they were tasked by the
Mm.
Soviets to create brandy, and that was lots of stories there. But they always made wine. But
Yeah.
that's biblically where Noah landed the ark and planted grapes. But there's the history of wine goes back in those places like Greece as well. And I think what's happened is that technologies have caught up. The idea that you can create interesting wines from these places with the proper techniques has changed it. And in California, that's why I asked the question about Greek wines in Virginia, we're seeing a lot right now.
Oh,
And they're typically organic. They're typically biodynamic. It's an interesting approach. They're not inexpensive, but all these, varieties I can't pronounce that have fascinating characters. That's why I asked the question.
yeah.
You have a WSET. I say WSET. WSET 3. Is that correct?
I do. Yes.
Yeah. And so, when you set out to do that, was that sort of own edification to learn, or what you felt was necessary as a credential to be a blogger? What was sort of the motivation behind that?
Yeah. So I started my blog in 2018 and really just, started it to try new wines. And I'm like, oh, whoever wants to follow me can just like learn with me. And it was really casual. And then I was like, I feel like in order to actually be credible and learn more in a proper way, I need to do some kind of formal education. So I did my research and I was like, I don't want to be a server in a restaurant. Let me do the WSET route. So I did my levels 1 and 2 in Virginia, and then I did my level 3 in Napa Valley. And I think like once I started my level 1, that's where my passion like really started to grow, because I already had that little spark. But then I got a taste of like actually learning and feeling like, oh my gosh, like, wait, I can do this. I know stuff. And that's when I was just like, kind of became addicted to it and kept going. So yeah, I'm starting my diploma next month, which I'm really excited. Thanks. Yeah, I'm like nervous, but excited. I've always been the type of person that likes a little bit more structure with education, and I kind of thrive under like a pressure and a challenge. So I'm going to go for it.
So for the listener, if you were to choose a program to, like, there's all kinds of online things that you can do, and you can read all you want. There's billions of books going back. I must have 300 wine books here in my shop alone that you could read about to understand. But how much of the WSET program, or even the Court of Sommeliers or the Master of Wine, is about actually tasting the wines, touching the soil, doing the things it takes on a practical basis to connect the dots?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I feel like that's why I love the WSET courses, because like everything I've learned, I've really like comprehended in a really good way. And they take you through it step by step so gradually. So you're learning about the viticulture in a way that really makes sense. I think, and I haven't done these classes, but like the sommelier route is more like self-study, read the book yourself, you kind of figure it out. And then the WSET, like you're one-on-one with instructors. You can ask these questions. And a lot of it's tasting too. And the way that the sommelier classes and the WSET classes taste, like the format is pretty different from what I've heard. But yeah, the way that I learned to taste wine through WSET like changed my life and the way that I taste wine. And it made it so much more approachable for me to like break down a wine and really understand it. So yeah, I mean, I love it. I love learning. So if you're with your friends,
let's say you go to dinner tonight with your friends. Your husband's not allowed to come. It's just your girlfriends, and you guys are, open to say what you want to each other. Like, so, I just know how it is with my wife. So, does the conversation end up on wine, or for me, it always does, and it's always a conversation that, as long as I keep my ears open and don't act like I did the other night, that it's just a fun conversation. It's just great to have it. That people have questions they want answered, and this WSET must have prepared you for those conversations in a rather profound way.
Yeah. It sometimes ends up in wine. I feel like then I kind of like will go off on a tangent and start losing people. Yeah, so I try to steer it that way. And then they're like, okay, yeah, cool. And then like change the subject. But of course, my brain is filled with all of the wine things. So yeah, sometimes.
I tend to sort of pace it and let the questions evolve.
Yeah.
And that usually leads to another question. And I don't know all the answers. I mean, the WSET probably is an evolving program and that things change. In fact, I had a sommelier here, Manuel Kamiji is a master som, long story, but he's actually the most prolific guest I've had 3 times. And almost all of them will tell you that back when they got the degree, for instance, and his was 1996, that you didn't have to know that much in regards to the regions of the world. You didn't study Greek wines at all. You didn't barely study Argentinian wines, and clearly there's no Armenian wine or Croatian wine or Lithuanian wine or Georgian wine. Now, you see in your studies that, man, there's a lot to study and understand and be able to, relate.
Yeah, absolutely. That's crazy. I mean, even just WSET 2 and 3, you're learning, you have to know those distinct regions in Greece and what expressions of wine they have. And it's a lot. I mean, already just France, Spain, and Italy is a lot. So having all those other I mean, that's crazy. And I'm sure it will continue to evolve and they'll continue updating the materials. And that's why I'm like, I'm just going to do it now before it gets
before it gets too complicated.
Yeah, for sure.
Have you steered any of your friends or people that you know or that you've influenced towards that kind of structured study, or at least sort of a regular study of wine other than that?
Yeah, I actually have. I've had a lot of people through Instagram and reach out and be like, you've inspired me to sign up for WSET. Like, I'm so excited. So I've received quite a few messages like that, which
that's great.
Makes me excited. Yeah.
That's really great. Is that what you would recommend then? I mean, if I come to you and say, look, Carolyn, I want to study wine, would you say go buy the cheapest stuff you can find at the market and taste those first? Or would you say start with the book? Or would you say start with a WSET and just get immersed in the academia of it?
It just depends on how serious you want to be. Like you said, there's so many amazing books, like go buy the Wine Bible, go buy Wine Folly. If you like reading through those and you feel like you really want a structured certification, then I would recommend WSET. But if someone's dream is to, work in a hotel or a restaurant, then maybe the sommelier route is more your speed. So, but I do love the WSET ones. I feel like they're approachable. And
did you find out, at least for me, because I'm old, that I'm learning all the time, but I've kind of figured out how I learn. I didn't know this when I was a child and even through college, like what types of methods worked better for me than others. And now I see that probably didn't seem like none of them worked that well in college, but but I find, like, for instance, I was studying French, that the quiz cards don't work for me. Like I could memorize the whole quiz thing. I could do the flashcards. I could memorize the whole string of them, but answer a question that's in a sentence with those same things, I would not get it right. So I've learned my method of learning. Did you find something about yourself during this process? Like, wow, wait a minute, I never knew that about me.
Yeah, especially because wine is so unique and it's very geographical. I learned that I'm a very visual learner. So I would draw out all of the maps of every region, hand draw, and then I would write in the notes, and having color and pictures to go along with it really helped me learn, because you're learning about all these places all around the world, and especially when you're talking about climate and soil and altitude and all this stuff, it's good to see it laid out. So I learned that.
Somebody said my geography, once I started studying wine, my geography went through the roof. It's
yeah,
right, all of a sudden
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I was never that great at geography in school, and now I'm okay, well, I'm getting some practice in.
You're pretty good now. I wonder what the great next frontier. What do you think the next frontier of wine is? Country wise. I'll just prod you a little bit. We went to Croatia a couple of years ago, and the wines were phenomenal. I didn't recognize a single grape. They don't grow anything that the French grow or the Italians grow. And the next frontier for wine in America. Maybe it's a theoretical question. I guess if you and I could answer this question, we'd be, we wouldn't be even doing this. We'd be sitting in
I
Monaco
know.
apartment because we know what the next great wave was going to be, but it does evolve. People's palates change, and I don't know how in America one Riesling was popular in the 70s, and then it was Cabernet. The noble. Anything
Yeah.
interesting on the horizon that you've tasted that you?
Oh, great question. I have tasted a couple Croatian wines, like you said, and they are so unique and amazing. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that is started to be more distributed over here. Something I haven't tasted is wines from the UK. So I'm kind of curious to see what happens over the next few years with wines and, of course, their champagne style and things like that. And if they'll start to distribute more, that would be kind of interesting. Because yeah, like I said, I haven't tried one. So
They're around.
yeah.
I was going through my dad's notes on his trip to the Isle of Wight in like the 70s, and it was all German style Riesling, grapes, and some unusual German grapes because of the weather. But now, but one for sure is Gooseborn champagne is really good. Bright Valley, being that I discussed earlier in the show, Steven Spurrier's brand. Don't know if they're going to still make it now that he passed away, but they are, in my opinion, world-class sparkling wines compete directly with champagne. Unfortunately, they're priced around the same price range. So
That's a bummer. Shoot.
I relied that was kind of fun, and you can reflect on this. When we were in Croatia, you had to rely on the Soms at the restaurants. These are Michelin star restaurants that have qualified Soms to choose something because you literally there's no Cabernet on the list, okay? And so you have to say, what do you recommend? And then I think that's part of our role in this industry.
Yeah.
What is your current passion for? What do you? Is this Italian whites? What is it like? You're sort of trying to peel back.
Yeah, good question. I mean, I feel like my current passion or whatever I'm most interested at the moment always stems from my travels. And we also went to South Africa this past year, and I haven't been able to stop like obsessing over South African wines because especially just the incredible value that they hold is amazing. And of course, it's way cheaper when you're actually over there versus buying them in the States is something different. But such amazing wines. Like they're like almost all organic vineyards. And the soil types are so interesting. You're getting really complex wines. I feel like they're not as widely distributed as other places. So I would love to like see more of that come to the US as well and keep learning about those and trying new things. I love them. So good.
South African ebbs and flows, much like Australian in America. I don't know if it's the value of the dollar when it happens, but they're not on the upswing, or that maybe they're at the beginning of the upswing. If you have the time, I had a podcast with Leah Provetta of Glenelly. Incredible wines with this amazing history connected to Bordeaux. So it's Glenelly is the name of it. But I have a note here that says you currently, maybe recently planted vines with your husband. Where'd you plant vines?
Yes. Yeah. So we found this beautiful piece of land with the Blue Ridge Mountains in the background, and we planted 3 acres. So we did 2 Petit Manseng, 1 Cabernet Franc. And we consulted a vineyard manager out here who actually won Virginia Grower of the Year to work with him to help us plant the vines and to kind of evaluate our whole site to see what would grow best. And of course, those 2 grape varieties do really well here. So we just planted them in May. And so, it'll be a couple of years before they start producing fruit. But
did you see a psychologist on this before you did this, or?
I know, right? It's crazy. I'm a little nervous, but it's just kind of a passion project. And for us, like, we're not even really interested in starting a winery. I feel like that would be too much stress for me. I love like the whole viticulture part of it. So we have people that are interested in buying the grapes, and we might try to do something else with the land as well, or just do like a small batch of our own. So the plans for the future of it are TBD, but it was a really cool experience to go through that process and, still going through it. We have to put up our trellising this year. And
Wow.
yeah, it's definitely like scary though, because it's just like always a battle with Mother Nature. And so
You're
it's
a
not gonna be
farmer,
easy.
girl. I mean, you
Yeah.
become a farmer. And I don't think that
Yeah.
for the listeners, it's really what winemaking is. It really starts in the
Yes.
vineyard. And,
Yeah.
our experience, my wife and I had 60 acres to plant in Paso Robles. And we thought we would do that, but then we realized we'd kill everything that we can't even grow a
Oh.
sapling from one of the kids' kits. It's foolproof. We still kill it. So
Yeah.
we got out of the business, and it happened to be the year that there was such a huge glut in Paso and Napa and Sonoma that even my neighbor who had 60 acres planted didn't even pick. It just
Oh
hung
my
right out
God.
because no one wanted the grapes. There was just too much. And that's what it's agriculture. But I think that's exciting for you that you guys have, that's great for a couple to get involved with the farming, the conversation, the decision making you have to do. The other problem for us in Paso, there was a couple of things. One was you had to wet farm something before you could build a house on this property. This was just the contingency of the property way back in the day. And so the land was really inexpensive at the time, but planting was like $20,000 an acre, and it was 60 acres. So that was like $1.5 million.
So expensive.
So expensive to do. And so we didn't do it because of that. And then this is just anecdotal. The other rules to build a house on this property consisted of things like you weren't allowed to put foil on your windows because this is a very rural part of Paso Robles. People just covered their windows with foil. You weren't allowed to put your clothes on a line that people could see. So if you wanted to dry your clothes in the sun, it had to be in a protected part of your house so that no one could see the clothes waving in the wind. And you could not park a vehicle on the dirt. It had to be on some kind of asphalt or cement slab. So they were trying to protect.
So many rules.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. So we end up with the house in Hermosa Beach, and we go to the beach all the time. How about your blog? You guys, I listened to one episode. So you and your husband have gotten together. You work together. Besides the farming and the blog, do you guys work? I mean, the podcast. Do you work together?
We do a little bit. So he's in real estate, and we this past year flipped 2 homes together. So that was another thing that we did, which was really fun. But he mostly, he'll sell and buy his homes and things with his clients, and then I'm all of the wine stuff as well. So we do a little bit of the flipping and vineyard stuff and podcast together. So we see a lot of each other.
We're almost out of time here, but my wife's been here for 25 years, so I know how the flip because we built in a lot of different homes and remodeled stuff, and it's always a struggle between us because we have different styles, right? How did this go? How did this flipping go? Did you get along?
We did, but yeah, not easy, because he's more of the like business financial, and I'm like, I want everything to look beautiful and creative. And so I was kind of shut down a little bit because we were trying to make money. Of course, it's not the house we're living in, it's for someone else. So, but it was fun and a good experience. And we're thinking of doing a few more, once the crazy market, I don't know. The market's been kind of all over these past few months. So we'll see what happens. But as
the wine market, but we'll look forward to seeing Flipping Virginia.
Yes.
The new show.
That would be great. Oh my gosh.
Such a pleasure having you on the show. It's already been almost an hour and so much to talk about. I hope we can do it again.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun.
We look forward to listening to the podcast coming out. Where can they find the podcast?
So the podcast is Conversations with the Covingtons on Spotify or Apple. And then you can also visit my website, carolyncovington.com, and follow me on all the things there.
And your Instagram handles, everything that's on the site, right?
Yes, my Instagram handle is Carolyn Covington.
So fascinating. And I look forward to seeing more from you. And I hope we can have a conversation. And I want to keep track of your travels. And maybe we'll bump into each other at the Etna Valley or the Etna Mountains in Sicily.
Yes. Oh, that would be amazing. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. This was
Cheers.
great. Cheers.